Snow fell hard over Santa Fe that night, dry and sharp, stinging the skin like ground glass. Laura Reed ran with her breath tearing at her lungs. Daniel pressed tight against her chest, his small body burning through her coat. Behind her, the house was already gone. Fire climbed the walls as if it had been waiting for permission, swallowing the life she had learned to endure rather than love. She did not look back. The wind carried the smell of smoke and whiskey, and with it the sound of a man shouting her name, angry, slurred, unfinished. Laura pushed forward, boots slipping on frozen ground, counting each step because stopping meant dying. Not just for her, for the child whose face was buried against her shoulder, silent in a way that frightened her more than crying ever could. When her legs finally failed, it was the dark shape of a blacksmith's forge. She leaned into cold stone, dead iron, and the last place anyone would look. She did not pray for rescue. She prayed only that the night would pass. Before we continue, would you believe they had a chance to survive what was coming? Like, subscribe, share your thoughts, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And let's see what happens when the past and survival collide. It was 1809, and Santa Fe lived by rules older than mercy. The town sat at the edge of empires and trade routes, shaped by soldiers, merchants, priests, and lawmen who believed order survived only if it remained narrow. Winter tightened those beliefs. Food was counted. Beds were measured. A woman alone might be tolerated. A woman with a child was a risk no one wanted to take. Laura knew this without being told. She had learned it door by door. She went first to the boarding house near the square. The woman who answered the door looked past Laura at once, her gaze stopping on the child. "We're full," the woman said before Laura finished speaking. The general store was next, then the baker, then a stable that smelled of hay and horses and hope. Each time, the pattern repeated itself with small variations: a pause, a glance at Daniel, a polite refusal sharpened by caution. Some did not bother with politeness at all. "A woman alone is one thing," a man muttered, not unkindly. "A child is another." She stopped counting doors. The town felt smaller now, its streets folding inward, closing ranks. She understood the unspoken rules. Winter made everyone careful. Winter made charity expensive. Her hands trembled as she remembered the way the lamp had tipped, the oil spreading across the floor like something alive, the heat, the shout behind her, the moment she had understood that staying meant dying, and leaving meant something worse, choosing who lived. She pushed the memory down. There would be time for guilt later. Survival came first. Finally, someone took her in. A laundress on the edge of town let Laura sleep near the stove in exchange for scrubbing clothes until her knuckles split. Laura worked without complaint. She did not sit. She did not ask for food. She kept Daniel quiet, rocking him with her foot while her hands moved through water gone gray and icy. It lasted 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, the laundress would not meet Laura's eyes. "The boy cries," she said, apologetic but firm. "The customers don't like it." Laura nodded. She packed without argument. That was how it went after that. A night here, 2 nights there, always the same ending, always the same look, relief, edged with guilt as doors closed behind her. She walked without direction then, letting instinct guide her feet away from the square, away from places that asked questions. Her own strength thinned, worn down by cold and refusal and the weight of never being able to rest. That was when she saw the blacksmith's forge. She knew who worked there. Everyone did. The blacksmith was Apache. People said it plainly, without anger, without welcome. He fixed what broke. He spoke little. He kept his distance. And the town returned the courtesy. Laura had learned to read danger quickly. A lone man, a forge, the edge of town, everything in her told her to turn away. But the wind cut through her coat, and Daniel's breath rasped softly against her skin. She did not think of kindness. She did not think of help. She thought only of heat. Laura slipped inside the forge after dusk, settling near the cold hearth, pressing Daniel close and wrapping her body around his as if she could make herself a wall against the night. The stone floor leached warmth from her bones. The silence pressed in. This time, when she closed her eyes, she did not think of hope. She thought of hours, of keeping Daniel alive until nightfall, of stone walls that might block the wind. She had nowhere else to go. She imagined morning and hoped, dimly, that they would still be alive when it came. The forge door opened with a low groan of iron on wood. Laura felt the sound before she saw the man. She stiffened, instinct tightening her arms around Daniel, her body angling to shield him, even as her mind searched for a way out that did not exist. Cold stone pressed against her back. The forge was empty of heat, empty of mercy, and she was caught inside it like something discovered rather than welcomed. The man stopped short when he saw them. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, dressed plainly in work clothes darkened by old soot. His hair was pulled back, his face weathered in a way that came from years outdoors rather than age. What struck Laura most was not his size, but his stillness. He did not rush forward. He did not speak. He looked at Daniel first, then at her, as if measuring something that could not be weighed. Laura braced herself for the words she had learned to expect. "You can't stay here. This isn't my problem. Go somewhere else." Instead, the man set down what he was carrying and moved past them without comment. Laura watched him cross the forge, her heart hammering, certain she had misjudged the moment. He knelt by the hearth and began to work. He struck flint. Once, twice. The sound was sharp in the quiet. Sparks caught, small and stubborn. He fed them carefully, breath controlled, movements practiced. Within minutes, the forge began to wake. Red crept back into the iron. Heat returned in slow, deliberate waves. Only then did he turn to her. "You're freezing," he said. His voice was low, steady. His words carried neither judgment nor comfort, just a fact. He poured water into a tin cup and set it near the fire to warm, from a small sack. He took bread and a strip of dried meat, broke them into manageable pieces, and placed them on a cloth. One portion he slid toward Laura. The smaller he set beside Daniel. "Eat first," he said, "then talk." Laura's hands shook as she reached for the cup. The warmth startled her. She had forgotten how quickly heat could undo a body pushed too far. She drank carefully, afraid of spilling, afraid of owing something she could not repay. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming automatically. "I didn't mean to. I know." "It's fine," he interrupted, not unkindly. "Just eat." Daniel stirred as the warmth reached him, a faint sound escaping his throat. Laura's breath caught. She fed him slowly, watching color return to his cheeks. Only when he had eaten did she allow herself a few bites, enough to steady her legs. "I can work," she said then, lifting her eyes to the man. "Anything, Cooking, cleaning. I can help here. I just need somewhere to sleep. Just through the winter. She waited for his gaze to harden, for him to notice what others had noticed. The child, the burden, the risk. He did not answer right away. Instead, he studied the forge, its walls, its tools, the open fire now breathing again. When he spoke, his words surprised her.
This is no place for children.
Laura's heart sank. Then he continued, "You can stay at my house." She stared at him, unsure she had heard correctly. "I'm James," he said. "I'm here most of the day. I only sleep there. There's a small room. It's empty." Suspicion flared before gratitude could settle. Why, she asked. James met her eyes. There was no calculation there, no hunger, only something old and familiar. "Because winter doesn't care why," he said. "And because you won't last out there." The simplicity of it broke something in her. Laura nodded once, afraid if she spoke, she would cry. James took his coat from a peg and held it out, stopping short of touching her. "It's colder outside." She accepted it, pulling it around Daniel, breathing in the faint scent of iron and smoke. As they stepped into the pale daylight together, Laura felt the town's eyes turn toward them, for the first time since the fire. She did not run. She followed the man who kept the fire alive. James's house stood a short walk from the forge, set back from the road as if it had learned, like its owner, to avoid notice. Snow had drifted against the walls, packed hard by wind. But the roof held firm. It was not a welcoming place in the way Laura once might have imagined a home. It was plain, quiet, built for endurance, not comfort. Inside, the air was cool but not bitter. A small stove sat cold in the corner, ash neatly swept. James moved with the same measured economy he had shown at the forge. He set down his tools, shrugged out of his coat, and crossed to the back of the house without speaking. "This room," he said, opening a narrow door. It was little more than a square space with a low bed, a wooden chair, and a small window half frosted over. Dust lay thin on the floor. No one had slept there in a long time. Laura stepped inside slowly, Daniel's weight familiar in her arms. She felt the walls with her eyes, gauging safety, measuring corners. The room did not threaten her. "I'll clean," she said quickly. "I can make it right." James nodded once. "Take your time." He did not linger. He did not explain rules or expectations. He left her there, which startled her almost as much as the offer itself. Laura stood still for a long time after he was gone. She waited, listening for footsteps that did not return. Habit urged her to remain invisible, to sit where she had been placed, to make herself small. That instinct had kept her alive once. It had also trapped her. She looked at Daniel, asleep against her shoulder, and understood that invisibility was no longer an option. A child needed warmth, rhythm, signs of life continuing. She began with the smallest things. She swept the floor slowly, lifting dust that had settled into corners and under furniture as if it had learned it would not be disturbed. She washed the basin, set it near the window where light could reach it. She folded the blanket James had left and placed it at the foot of the bed. Each movement steadied her breathing. Each small order pushed the night back. In the kitchen, she found what winter allowed: a sack of potatoes, dried beans, a small crock of fat. Nothing wasted, nothing extra. She cooked carefully, mindful of sound, mindful of space, as if the walls might object. By afternoon, The house smelled faintly of warmth of food meant to be eaten rather than endured. Daniel woke and watched her with serious eyes. She spoke to him in a low voice, narrating what she did, the way she had learned to do to keep fear from taking root. When he grew restless, she set him on the floor with a wooden spoon and a tin cup. He banged them together, delighted by the noise. Laura flinched, then stopped herself. The sound did not bring shouting. It did not bring fists. It brought nothing at all. By the time the light thinned and the cold returned to the windows, the house no longer felt borrowed. It felt awake. James came home after dark. The first thing he noticed was the light. He stopped just inside the door, his hands still on the latch, his body braced for what he did not yet understand. The house had always been dark when he returned, silent, waiting, indifferent to his arrival. Tonight, the glow reached him before he crossed the threshold. The second thing he noticed was the smell. It was not rich or indulgent. It was simple, familiar. Food prepared with care rather than haste. The scent caught him off guard, tugging at something he had not named in years. He stood there longer than he meant to, boots still on, listening. There were sounds inside, soft ones, the clink of a spoon, the hush of a woman's voice speaking to a child. James felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. He stepped in. Laura looked up from the table, surprise flickering across her face, followed by something like caution. She had set 2 plates. One was already cooling. She stopped herself, searching his face. I hope that's all right. James said nothing at first. He set his coat aside with deliberate care, as if sudden movement might break what he was seeing. The room looked different. Not transformed, he would have noticed that, but aligned. Things were where they should be. The chair no longer wobbled. The basin was clean. The air felt inhabited. Daniel watched him from the floor, wooden spoon clenched in his fist like a declaration. You didn't have to, James said finally. I know, Laura replied. I wanted to. The words landed somewhere unexpected. They ate in near silence, not the strained quiet of strangers, but the heavier one that comes when too much is being noticed at once. James ate more slowly than usual, aware of the warmth spreading through him, aware of the way Laura kept her eyes on Daniel rather than on him, as if giving space was a form of respect. When the plates were cleared, James stood. You can stay, he said. There's no pressure. Laura met his gaze. There's always pressure, she said softly. He did not argue. Over the next days, a rhythm formed without discussion. Laura rose early. She cooked what there was. She cleaned, repaired, made do. She learned the sounds of the house in the hours James kept. She did not ask questions. She did not pry. She allowed the past to remain where it was. James noticed everything. He noticed that there was always something warm waiting when he returned, that his clothes were mended without comment, that the house no longer felt like a place he passed through on the way to sleep. He noticed that Daniel learned his footsteps and looked up before the door opened. He noticed the way Laura waited, not standing, not watching the door, but present, anchored. It unsettled him. He had lived alone long enough to mistake solitude for peace. This was different. This was being accounted for without being claimed. It made him wary and grateful in equal measure. One evening, as snow fell again and the forge fire burned low, James sat at the table longer than usual. Laura did not rush him. She poured him another cup of water without asking. The gesture was ordinary. The effect was not. He felt a pressure behind his eyes and looked away. "I'm not used to this," he said, surprising himself. Laura paused, then nodded. "Neither am I." What Laura did not say was that the work steadied her. Each task placed something back where it belonged. Each completed motion reminded her that she could still build something, even now. The town noticed. Laura felt it in the way conversations paused when she passed, in the way eyes followed Daniel, then shifted to James, measuring, reassessing. No one spoke to her directly. No one challenged James openly. Santa Fe had rules it preferred not to say aloud. He was useful. He was quiet. He did not disturb the balance. Until now. A knock came late one afternoon as the light thinned and the cold crept back in. Laura was folding laundry when she heard it firm. Deliberate. Not a neighbor, not a friend. James opened the door. Sheriff Edward Wallace stood on the step, hat in hand, his breath visible in the air. He did not enter. "Afternoon," Wallace said. His eyes moved past James, into the house. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" James stepped aside, leaving the door open. "Ask." "There's been talk," the sheriff said evenly, "about a woman and a child staying here." Laura came forward before James could answer. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but her voice held. "I asked to stay," she said. "I work for it." Wallace's gaze shifted to her, then to Daniel, peering from behind her skirt. "Your name Laura Reed?" widowed Wallace asked. "Direct." "Yes," Laura said, the word heavy and practiced. Wallace studied her for a long moment. There was no accusation in his face, but neither was there comfort. "I'll need to look into it," he said at last. James did not argue. He nodded once. Wallace left as he had come, the cold slipping back into place behind him. That night, Laura did not sleep. She sat by Daniel's bed, counting his breaths, her mind replaying the questions she had answered without hesitation. Widowed. The words settled on her like snow quiet, concealing, heavy. James did not press her. He made tea, set it beside her, and sat across the room, giving her space she had not asked for but needed. In the flicker of the lamp, she noticed how tired he looked, not from work, from waiting, from years of it. Morning brought a small miracle. A basket sat at the forge door when James arrived, covered with a cloth, butter, fresh milk, bread still warm. A note lay atop it, the handwriting plain. "Sorry for the misunderstanding. This is for the child. No name." James brought it home without comment. Laura stared at the basket for a long time before she laughed. A sound that surprised them both. It was small and quick, gone almost as soon as it came. "They saw him," she said softly. "Not just me." James nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." Winter did not loosen its grip that week, but something else did. The house grew warmer, not from the stove alone. Laura began to notice James in ways she had not allowed herself before. The careful distance, the way he waited to be invited into any shared space, the way he listened without interrupting. And James began, without realizing it, to wait for her light to be on when he returned. Neither of them named what was forming. They did not have to. The house already knew. The second visit came with no warning. Laura sensed it before she heard the knock. There was a weight to the afternoon that had nothing to do with weather. The light outside the window had gone flat and colorless, as if the world were holding its breath. Daniel was on the floor with a piece of twine James had given him, looping it clumsily around a chair leg. Absorbed in a task that required no understanding of danger, the knock was firm, measured, lawful. James rose at once. Laura stood with him, her body already braced, her heart beating too fast for the quiet room. Sheriff Edward Wallace stood on the step again, hat in hand, this time. He was not alone. The man beside him was younger, neatly dressed, his boots clean in a way that suggested he had not traveled far on foot. His hair was lighter than James's, his posture straighter. But Laura saw it immediately, the shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes. He belonged to the same bloodline as someone she had spent months trying not to remember. Peter Reed. The name came to her unbidden, sharp as ice. Her breath caught. Her hands went numb. For a moment, the room tilted, and she smelled smoke where there was none. Peter's eyes moved past James and found her. Recognition flickered there, not shock, not relief, but something careful, prepared. "Mrs. Reed," he said, nodding as if greeting her in a church aisle rather than at the edge of her rebuilt life. Laura did not answer. Sheriff Wallace spoke instead. "We need to talk." James stepped aside without a word. The door remained open. Cold air slipped in, unwelcome and familiar. Peter cleared his throat. "The house burned," he said. "But my brother didn't die." The words landed softly, which somehow made them worse. "He was burned." Peter continued. "Not badly. He's alive, asking for you." Laura felt Daniel move behind her leg, sensing the shift in the room. She reached back and placed her hand on his head, anchoring herself to the present. Peter's voice took on a practiced gentleness. The fire scared him. "Laura." It woke him up. "He's been different since. He stopped drinking. He keeps asking about you, about the child." A memory stirred faint. Dangerous. A version of Vernon Reed who had once laughed easily, who had carried Daniel in the early months with something like pride. For one brief, traitorous second, Laura felt the pull of that memory, the idea that the worst thing might already be behind her. Then another thought rose, colder and clearer. She lifted her eyes to Peter. "If he's changed," she said quietly, "why isn't he here?" Peter hesitated, just a fraction too long. "And if he's sober," she continued, turning her gaze to Sheriff Wallace, "why did you come instead of him?" Silence answered her. Laura felt something settle inside her, solid, undeniable. She took a step forward, placing herself fully between Daniel and the men at the door. "Is he drunk right now?" she asked. Peter did not respond. Sheriff Wallace exhaled slowly. He removed his hat, rubbing a hand over his hair as if the motion might smooth away the moment. "Vernon Reed," he said at last, "has a record. Public intoxication. Repeated incidents. Reports of violence. Reports of abandonment." Peter looked at him sharply. "Those were old." "They were ongoing," Wallace corrected. "And they don't disappear because a house burns." Laura nodded once. The truth no longer frightened her. "I didn't kill him," she said, her voice steady. "But I didn't go back for him either. I took my child and I left." Peter frowned. "You left him to die?" "No," Laura replied. "I left him to face what he'd done." Her chest tightened, but she did not look away. "If I go back, I'll die there. Or Daniel will. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually." Daniel whimpered softly, sensing the tension. James moved then not toward the men, but toward the child. He knelt, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder, grounding him with a presence that asked for nothing. Sheriff Wallace watched that small gesture closely. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Laura said. "I'm telling you the truth." The words hung in the air, unadorned. Peter's shoulders sagged. The argument he had brought with him unraveled. piece by piece, undone not by anger, but by absence. Vernon was not here. He had not come, and that fact spoke louder than anything Peter could say. Wallace replaced his hat. "I won't force you to return," he said, "but there will need to be paperwork. A formal separation. This can't stay as it is." Laura nodded. She had expected that. She welcomed it. Peter lingered a moment longer, his eyes moving to Daniel, then back to Laura. "He was wrong," he said quietly, "but he's still my brother." "I know," Laura replied. "That doesn't make him my husband anymore." Peter stepped back. Sheriff Wallace turned with him, the two figures retreating into the cold afternoon. The door closed with a soft, final sound. For a long time, no one spoke. Laura's knees trembled, the tension draining all at once. She sank into a chair, pulling Daniel into her lap, breathing in the scent of his hair, the reality of him alive and safe. James brought her a cup of water and set it down without comment. He did not ask what she would do next. He did not offer solutions. He simply stayed. After a while, Laura looked up at him. "I'll go to the sheriff in the morning," she said. "I won't run anymore." James met her gaze. "You won't be alone." That night, Laura slept deeply for the first time since the fire. No dreams, no smoke, just darkness that did not threaten to close in. Morning came clear and cold. Laura wrapped Daniel in his coat and walked to the sheriff's office with her head high. Edward Wallace listened, reviewed the records, and nodded. The process began and ended with surprising speed, driven less by law than by recognition. When Laura returned home, the papers folded in her coat, James was waiting at the table. She placed the documents between them. He looked at them briefly, then back at her. "It's done," she said. James nodded. No smile, no celebration. Only the quiet understanding that something heavy had been set down, outside. Winter still held the town in its grip, but inside the house, the fire burned steadily. No longer a thing to flee, only something to tend. And for the first time, Laura believed that the life she was building would not be taken from her in the night. The house changed after that morning, though nothing in it was moved. Laura felt the difference first in herself. The tightness she had carried in her shoulders for months loosened, not all at once, but enough that she noticed when she breathed. She began sleeping through the night. When she woke, it was to Daniel's small movements or the sound of James stirring in the other room, not to the crackle of imagined flames. She kept to her routines. Bread at dawn, beans set to soak, floors swept clean of yesterday's grit. Work steadied her, it always had, but now there was an ease in it, a sense that the order she built would last beyond the day. She no longer worked as if everything might be taken by nightfall. James did not speak of the visit. He did not ask what she had told the sheriff, or how it felt to stand there with the past named and contained on paper. He did not need to. He adjusted in smaller ways, coming home earlier when he could, leaving a place at the table without looking to see if she noticed. When Daniel toddled into the forge doorway one afternoon, James lifted him without hesitation and carried him back to the house, explaining the tools as they went. His voice careful, patient. Laura watched that, her chest tightening with a feeling she recognized only later as gratitude without debt. One evening, after the dishes were washed and Daniel had fallen asleep with his fingers curled around a wooden peg, Laura sat at the table longer than usual. The lamp burned low. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes, a reminder that winter had not yet released Santa Fe. "There's more," she said finally. James looked up from where he was mending a strap. "You don't have to. I want to," Laura replied. The words surprised her with their certainty. She told him then everything she had not said, how the drinking had crept in, slow and excused, how anger followed, how the lamp had tipped, how the fire leapt, how she had chosen the door over the man who had already chosen the bottle over his family. She spoke without drama, without apology. She told it as a sequence of facts, because that was what it had been. When she finished, James did not speak right away. He set the strap aside, his hands still, his eyes steady on hers. "You saved a child," he said. The simplicity of it undid her. Laura's breath caught, and she pressed her hand to the table to keep herself upright. No one had ever named it that way. Not survival, not escape, saving. She nodded, once. From that night on, something between them settled into place. Not romance, not yet, but a mutual understanding that neither of them was being tolerated or spared. They were choosing to be there. Spring arrived reluctantly, melting snow into mud, lengthening the days. Laura found herself standing on the porch in the mornings, watching the light creep across the yard. Daniel learned the paths between house and forge by heart, calling James's name as if it were a constant rather than a risk. James answered every time. When early summer finally came, it did so quietly. The cold lifted without ceremony. The town breathed easier. And one evening, as the air softened and the light lingered, James stopped Laura by the door. He did not kneel. He did not hold anything in his hands. He stood where he always stood, in the space that had become shared without being claimed. "Stay," he said. Then he corrected himself. "Not because you need to, because I want you to stay." Laura looked past him, to the yard where Daniel was crouched in the dirt, intent on something only he could see. She thought of the winter, the fire, the papers folded and unfolded until the edges softened. She thought of the care she had learned to give and the care she had learned to accept. "I'll stay," she said. They did not rush. They married without spectacle, with the quiet approval of a town that had learned to mind its own thresholds. Years followed, marked by work and weather and children who arrived one by one, each welcomed into a house that knew how to hold them. The forge changed, too. It filled with voices and questions. James taught with patience, showing small hands how to keep distance from heat, how to listen to iron before striking. He taught them that the work was hard and necessary, that it asked for respect and returned usefulness, if not praise. Laura watched from the doorway sometimes, a child on her hip, the firelight warming her face. She knew then what she had built was not fragile. It had been tested by cold and flame and fear, and it had held. Laura no longer startled at loud sounds. Winter still came to Santa Fe, but it no longer felt like an enemy waiting to claim her. She had learned that survival was not only about running from danger, but about choosing where and with whom you stood your ground. James never spoke much about the past. He did not need to. His life was visible in the way he listened, in the way he waited before acting, in the way he allowed himself to be cared for without shame. Laura had given him something no one ever had, the certainty that he was not alone, that he did not have to earn his place through usefulness alone. Their story was not remembered for drama or triumph. It endured because it was ordinary in the best way. A woman who refused to return to harm. A man who offered safety without claiming ownership. A family built not from obligation, but from daily choice. The lesson of their lives was clear and simple. Safety is the beginning, not the reward. Care is not weakness, it is a skill learned and practiced. And love, when it lasts, is not proven in grand declarations, but in the quiet choice to stay even when every part of the world invites you to go.